Today, we are going to be discussing a new feature that has been introduced by Nutanix, which is Xtract for VMs and Xtract for databases. Welcome to Tech TopX. My name is Arpita and I am a systems reliability engineer at Nutanix in San Jose. Let's first talk about Xtract for VM migration. Xtract is a cross-hypervisor live migration solution migrating VMs with minimal downtime. With Xtract, you can migrate powered on or powered off VMs, pause and resume migration, schedule migration, etc. Before attempting to migrate VMs using Xtract for VMs, make sure to satisfy some of the general requirements. For example, VMware tools must be installed and up to date on the guest VM for migration. The virtual hardware version running on the VM should be a minimum of 7. The ESXi version should be a minimum of 5.5. The host should not be in maintenance mode, etc. Also, we need to deploy an Xtract VM using the disk image available on Nutanix portal in order to be able to do the migration. Let's have a look. So once you have the VM created for Xtract and network configured for the same, you can access the GUI from any browser. So the default credentials for this would be Nutanix and the password would be Nutanix/for you. Okay, so once we are logged in, we'd be putting in the credentials and the details for the source environment, which will be a vCenter IP, and for the target environment, which will be an AHV cluster. Okay, I'll add a Okay, so once we have added the source and target, we'll create a migration plan. That would be demo migrate. Okay, this is the target cluster, the container that you want to select on the AHV cluster. So once you have put in those details, this will give you the list of all the VMs that are present on the source. These are differentiated as migratable and non-migratable VMs. So you can either filter it out as migratable VMs or non-migratable or all VMs. So for instance, if you hit on non-migratable, there'll be a question mark besides the VM, which will tell you why is it not ready for migration yet. So this one says that the VM is a template. Please convert it to a VM and refresh your inventory to migrate it. Similarly, there are some reasons like VMware tools are not installed, etc. Yeah, so you can also search the VM using the search tab. Okay, so this is the VM I want to migrate. Then click on next. Okay, so once this is done, you would be putting in the credentials for the VM. So here mine is a Linux VM, so I'll put in the credentials for the Linux. Along with that, select the network mappings that you need to select. Be 724 for me. So if you need to schedule the data seeding, you can do that, or else you can just go ahead and click on next if you want to do it right now. So these are the details of our migration, the source environment, the target environment, the network mappings. So this is the source network mappings. These are the target network mapping. Now you can just save or else save and start. I'll save and start the migration. The migration is divided into two parts for this VM. So first is the seeding of data and the other would be cutover. So during seeding, it pre-copies the data of VM to the target cluster without a downtime, followed by a very small cutover period. We see that the migration is in progress. So right here, it's 10%, and you can then go back. If you want to abort the migration, you can do it. If you want to pause the migration, you can do that as well. In a little while, it will also give you an estimate when would the migration complete. We'll fast forward to the part where migration completes, and we'll start with the cutover of the VM. Okay, so looks like the VM is ready to be cut over. So let's do the cutover. Okay, so right now we see that the cutover is in progress. Okay, so let's go ahead and view the VM in Prism. Okay, there you go. You see the VM that we were trying to migrate from the vSphere source cluster is now on the AHV cluster now. So let's see what's the status here. Okay, so it says completed. Let's go ahead and launch console. So I was successfully able to log in using the credentials of the VM that we used on the source cluster, and the migration of the VM has now completed from ESXi host to the AHV cluster. That was Xtract for VM. Now let's take a look at Xtract for database migration. Xtract for databases enables you to migrate your Microsoft SQL Server instances from non-Nutanix infrastructure to Nutanix Cloud Platform with a one-click operation. You can migrate both virtual and physical SQL servers to Nutanix. Xtract captures the state of your source SQL Server environments and applies any recommended changes. So let's take a look at that. The Xtract for database migration is similar to Xtract for VM, wherein you need to deploy an Xtract VM first using the disk image from Nutanix portal. This is the interface for Xtract for database migration. There are two options which we could use. One could be an existing project that you have already created and you need to proceed on the same. The other would be you create a new project. So let's create a new project. Create. Xtract for database migration is divided into 4 parts. It's scanning. Scans discover your existing SQL Server environments through application level inspection. The second part is design, where it creates an automated Nutanix best practice design for the target SQL servers. The third would be deployment. So this is the deployment of the VM at the source cluster, which is the Windows server on the target cluster. And migration. Migration is the last part of where the data is migrated from the source SQL Server database to the target SQL servers. So let's start with the scan. Say scan 1. Put in the IP address for the SQL instance at the source. The SQL Server instance, that would be okay. So you can also do a bulk upload, wherein you can upload multiple SQL servers for migration. Let's begin the scan. Xtract scans the workload and takes the inventory of hardware and software and also the performance configuration and sizes the target, which helps apply Nutanix best practices for SQL Server databases. There we have the result from our scan. So this is the scan details page, which displays the details of the scan for SQL Server instance. This may take a few minutes depending on the number of server instances you need to scan. Once this is done, we would proceed to generate design. So based on the configurations of the server instances scanned, Xtract generates an ideal Nutanix best practice design template for your target SQL Server instances. So these are the design details for the selected SQL server. In our case, it's the server instance that we selected right here. You can also view the source details. These are the details of the SQL instance that we have. Now we can proceed to deploy. So the deployment phase helps us deploy a Windows server and install the SQL Server instance on the target environment. Okay, so the design has been generated. Deploy. Let's proceed with deploy. The deployment itself also includes 4 paths. When we proceed to deploy, it'll prompt us to enter the Prism credentials for the target cluster. So once you have put in the Prism credentials, we'll hit connect. So the Xtract VM connects to the Prism and identifies the hypervisor that is based on the target cluster. This may also take a couple of minutes to connect and check the hypervisor details. Okay, so now it's connected. So there it says that the target hypervisor discovered on the cluster is AHV. So after this is done, we'll go to configure VM. So configure VM, what it does is it'll help us deploy the Windows server on the target host. And the next step, which says OS configuration, would be the installation of SQL Server instance on the Windows server. So this would be the image for the Windows Server 2012 R2 in our case. I select the SQL ISO in this part. Okay, enter credentials, which would allow us to install the SQL instance on the Windows server. Okay, validate and save. So here we can review and deploy. So one thing we need to note is the target VM master image and the SQL image that I selected would be the same as the one on the source cluster. Okay, I hit deploy. So Xtract is now cloning Windows 2012 R2 VM and installing SQL from the ISO image that I provided, and the specific design generated is applied to it automatically. We can view the progress of the deployment in the interactive deployment dashboard that we see right here. It shows all the completed tasks, the tasks that are pending. Okay, so we'll fast forward to the completion of the deployment so that we get to the migration stage. Okay, so looks like the deployment of the Windows server has completed. We'll now proceed to migrate the VM. Okay, now similar to the Xtract for VMs, we create a migration plan here. I select the server instance that we have, then click next. Okay, I'll hit the button save, or you can just save and start the plan. And there you go. So now the migration of data has completed and the server is ready to cut over. So let's go ahead and cut over databases. Okay, I proceed. In the meanwhile, let's check the target Prism if we see the SQL server that we have created. Okay, here you go. You have the demo Xtract DB that we created. The SQL server has been deployed already. Let's go into the console. This is the Windows server that you have, and the SQL has been installed on this. Okay, so right now we see that the cutover is in progress. Once the cutover completes, the SQL server from the source environment is completely migrated of it to the target cluster, and now the server on the target Prism is ready to use. So there you have it. Check out all our other videos from our newest releases. Be sure to subscribe and leave a comment. Thanks for watching and have a good day.